Welcome, I'm Tatiana Darzi. The Chinese Communist Party has been exploiting the unrest in the U.S., followed by George Floyd's death, to fuel its disinformation campaign. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo slammed the CCP's callous exploitation to justify its authoritarian denial of basic human dignity.
The protests and riots following the death of George Floyd have prompted Chinese state media to belittle human rights in the United States and equated the situation with the Hong Kong protests. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo then issued a statement in response to the attacks, pointing out the differences between China and the United States in slamming the Chinese Communist Party for its false propaganda and for trying to whitewash its dictatorship. On June 6th, Pompeo issued a statement to reprimand the CCP for exploiting the George Floyd death and trying to legitimize its authoritarian rule. The Chinese Communist Party's callous exploitation of the tragic death of George Floyd to justify its authoritarian denial of basic human dignity exposes its true colors yet again. As with dictatorships throughout history, no lie is too obscene, so long as it serves the party's lust for power. This laughable propaganda should not fool anyone, Pompeo said.
There's a profound background to Pompeo's statement, a statement published as a strong retaliation to the CCP's propaganda. This background is that, in the context of the confrontation between China and the United States, the Chinese Communist Party has used every opportunity to plant evidence, to frame, and to smear the United States.
On May 25th, Minnesota resident George Floyd was reported to police for using a fake banknote in a store and was apprehended by an officer who knelt on his neck for 9 minutes, resulting in Floyd's death. The police officer was subsequently charged with second-degree murder. The incident triggered many protests and riots in Minnesota and many other states across the U.S. and included arson, looting, and even several killings. In order to ensure the safety of the legitimate protesters and the public, police and the National Guard were called to control the riots. Yet the CCP took the opportunity to launch a propaganda campaign to badmouth human rights in the United States and equated the incident with the Hong Kong protests and its need to crack down on Hong Kong protesters. However, according to many reports, the Floyd riots were organized by a number of leftist groups, including by the CCP itself. For instance, in a video of riots near the White House on June 1st, someone is heard yelling in Chinese, "Hurry up, hurry, let's leave."
The CCP definitely secretly hid behind and manipulated the riots. Now it is using the incident to justify its brutal suppression of Hong Kong people's resistance. Such action is despicable in everyone's view.
Tian Yuan, a current affairs commentator, also expressed his opinion that the George Floyd case is just one case of police brutality against a black man and does not represent the attitude by law enforcement throughout the United States. All peaceful protests are allowed in the United States, but killing, arson, violent destruction of property, and looting are crimes that put everyone in danger. Moreover, the protests and demonstrations in Hong Kong are legal, and it is the Hong Kong police that are using the violence in confronting peaceful protesters.
The truth behind the suppression of the CCP in Hong Kong is that it totally violates the Sino-British Joint Declaration and international law, whereas the racial harassment and the kind of violence that is occurring in many cities in the United States are criminal acts. China is not a normal country. Universal values and truths are welcomed in free democratic countries but become hearsay in China and can be suppressed. There are countless examples of this. One example is freedom of religious beliefs. All of these examples show clearly the contrast between China and the rest of the world.
As Mike Pompeo said in his statement, in China, when a church burns, the attack was almost certainly directed by the CCP. In America, when a church burns, the arsonists are punished by the government, and it is the government that brings fire trucks, water, aid, and comfort to the faithful. Pompeo continued, in China, peaceful protesters from Hong Kong to Tiananmen Square are clubbed by armed militiamen for simply speaking out. Reporters writing of these indignities are sentenced to long terms in prison. In the United States, law enforcement, both state and federal, brings rogue officers to justice, welcomes peaceful protests while forcefully shutting down looting and violence, and exercises power pursuant to the Constitution to protect property and liberty for all. Our free press covers events wall to wall for all the world to see. Pompeo also mentioned the CCP virus pandemic in his statement. In China, when doctors and journalists warn of the dangers of a new disease, the CCP silences and disappears them and lies about death totals and the extent of the outbreak. In the United States, we value life and build transparent systems to treat, cure, and underwrite, more than any other nation, pandemic solutions for the globe. Beijing in recent days has showcased its continuing contempt for the truth and scorn the law. The CCP's propaganda efforts, seeking to conflate the United States' actions in the wake of the death of George Floyd with the CCP's continued denial of basic human rights and freedom, should be seen for the fraud that they are, Pompeo said. Pompeo also emphasized that the Chinese Communist Party imprisons people who think differently, and when people embrace their freedom, that freedom is suppressed, and the people have to surrender to the party's commands and demands. But even in the midst of the riots, the United States is steadfast in its commitment to freedom, the rule of law, transparency, and inalienable human rights. Pompeo's statement ended saying, "During the best of times, the PRC ruthlessly imposes communism. Amid the most difficult challenges, the United States secures freedom."
Congressman Mike Gallagher believes the CCP is the greatest threat to the United States of all times. What he worries about the most is the CCP's infiltration aiming to divide the international community. Gallagher suggested the core of the U.S.-China competition is having better allies, and the United States is in an advantageous position.
Congressman Michael Gallagher is a member of the bipartisan committee China Task Force, which oversees congressional strategy on China and develops legislative policies to curtail Chinese influence. On Monday, June 8th, he indicated that having better quality allies is the biggest advantage the United States has against the Chinese Communist Party.
The core of competition will come down between the US and China will come down to who has better quality friends. We start from an enormous advantage in that area. China doesn't want friends. It wants vassal states, and it views other countries as barbarians to be handled.
He believes that the CCP is the greatest threat to the U.S. in all time, involving areas such as the economy, national security, and politics. In the present U.S.-China competition, the U.S. takes the slowest and weakest response in the area of ideology.
There is a naive temptation to believe that frictions in the U.S.-China relationship are just a product of the Trump administration's more hawkish approach, and that part of it is related to how we underestimate the way in which Xi and the CCP look at this through an ideological lens.
Gallagher believes that the nature of the CCP has not changed for decades, and what worries him the most is the United Front infiltration used by the CCP to divide the international community. Being a friend member of the Australian Parliament, he recently publicly condemned the CCP for using economic intimidation to retaliate against Australia's call for an independent investigation into the origin of the CCP virus.
Wolf warrior diplomacy that we talked about before is now something of a truism, which expresses the way in which they're trying to drive wedges throughout the free world, but I think are actually uniting the free world, at least the Five Eyes.
Last Friday, June 5th, congressmen and politicians from 8 democratic countries, including the U.S., formed the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. Gallagher believes that the current CCP virus pandemic and the Hong Kong situation have awakened many countries to form a joint effort to contain the Chinese Communist Party.
Hao Haidong, a famous Chinese soccer player who was known for being patriotic, spoke out against the Chinese regime. He openly called the Chinese Communist Party a terrorist organization that has caused horrific atrocities against humanity. Chinese media didn't dare to report on Hao's statements because of his strong influence and large fan base. The regime had opted to stay silent on the matter, and any coverage on Hao was quickly deleted.
June 4th marked the 31st anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party's massacre of pro-democracy student protesters at Tiananmen Square in Beijing. Guo Wengui, an exiled Chinese tycoon, and Steve Bannon, a former strategic advisor to the U.S. White House, along with others, announced the establishment of the Federal State of New China via a live online broadcast. Bannon read out the English declaration while Chinese soccer star Hao Haidong read out the Chinese declaration.
灭中共是正义的需要，中共是共产国际资助的，颠覆了中国合法政府的恐怖组织，其在中国的集权统治已发展为彻底的反人类暴行，无视人权，摧毁人性，践踏民主，违背法治，撕毁合约，血洗香港，杀害藏民，输出腐败，危害全球。消灭中共是打碎中国人民的奴隶枷锁和真正实现世界和平之必须。没有中共的新中国联邦是全体人民和世界繁荣之必须。
Hao's wife and former badminton world champion Ye Zhaoying later joined him on camera to show her support.
总是会有人站出来，如果不是我们站出来，可能也会有别人站出来，只是这个机缘巧合，这个机会上天给了我们。
Hao was a main player in the Chinese national soccer team in the 1990s. He also played for the military-affiliated 1981 team. He was once called a patriotic player by the CCP. Jianping Lai, a political expert from China University of Political Science and Law, expressed his support for the former soccer star.
There are very few people in China who don't know a sports star like Hao Haidong. In people's minds, he has always had an image of someone who loves the party, who loves the country. Now he has openly spoken against the CCP and its authoritarian regime. This means that a general trend of rebellion among the people has developed, and that this man is quite courageous.
Hao's anti-communist stance has stirred up controversy. China's Titan Sports indirectly criticized Hao in an article it posted on Weibo on June 4th. The article referred to Hao as the soccer player with the surname H and later deleted the post. The popular Chinese sports website Hupu.com also released a statement claiming that due to Hao's so-called harmful comments, discussion on the topic would be banned immediately. However, this announcement has also been subsequently deleted by Hupu.com. In response, netizens ridiculed the Chinese regime with the following comments. CCP seems to be really scared. So scared that they dare not mention this Hao Haidong name when condemning someone. What is the content of the wrong speech? What did soccer player with surname H say? Let us hear it.
It doesn't even have the courage to criticize him, because it is too scared. The CCP knows how influential this man is. So, as long as it criticizes him, there is bound to be a backlash, which will cause many people to start looking into what happened to Hao Haidong. What did he do? Why is he being pressured to leave the country? Why is he now openly speaking out against the CCP? People will definitely want to find out the reasons and the process behind it.
U.S. Affairs commentator Xing Tianxing believes that Hao has a reason to come forward.
One reason is the Chinese Communist Party's retrogressive actions, and everything it has done to date has been seen as extremely evil. No one with a conscience would be able to tolerate the existence of the evil CCP regime. The other reason is the global landscape, in which the entire world is uniting together to fight against the CCP. And I think Hao Haidong believes that heaven will destroy the CCP.
At present, Hao's Weibo account that has 7.7 million followers has been blocked. His wife's Weibo account has also been blocked. But Hao's video is still widely spread in various WeChat groups in mainland China, and the video has attracted numerous likes. Hao tweeted on June 5th, "The biggest and most correct choice we've made in our lifetime today is reading the Declaration of the Federal State of New China. It's a lifetime glory."
A Chinese student in Australia is threatened and harassed by the CCP after her identity was exposed. The Chinese police is now forcing her to return to China to turn herself in for committing so-called serious crimes against the party, including participating in pro-democracy demonstrations, introducing other Chinese to bypassing the Great Firewall, the Chinese internet censorship, and openly expressing her opinion against the CCP.
A Chinese student in Australia exposed the threats and harassment her family experienced from Chinese authorities after she participated in rights-defending activities overseas. To protect her family, she uses the alias Zhu, a pun for keen observer. Zhu started her study in Australia last June. She has organized 2 memorials in Melbourne for the CCP virus victim Li Wenliang, the whistleblower doctor who first publicized information about the outbreak in December 2019. Last October, she went to Hong Kong to participate in the pro-democracy demonstrations. In April, the CCP's state security identified Zhu's real name and her family background. The officers summoned Zhu's father in the middle of the night. They told him that Zhu allegedly committed the crimes of inciting overseas Chinese people to assemble in front of the Chinese embassy and teaching the Chinese how to bypass the Great Firewall, the Chinese regime's sophisticated online censorship mechanism. They forced her father to obtain her Twitter password and asked him to persuade her to turn herself in. Zhu told the Epoch Times that her father was a Communist Party member and a professional scholar studying Marxism. After being threatened by the state security agency, her father recently tried to persuade her to return home.
Could you summarize your experience? And what happened to your father?
The state security officers noticed me and figured out my identity. They summoned my father to the police station, forcing him to get my Twitter password from me. I certainly rejected him. The officers then enumerated the crimes I committed, such as inciting overseas Chinese people to rally in front of the Chinese embassy and teaching the Chinese how to bypass the Great Firewall. My father was summoned to the police station at midnight several times. I think they were trying to intimidate him, as they said they are investigating and taking my crimes seriously. My crimes are now classified to a more serious level and are reported to the national security, so on and so forth. I don't know if it's true or just intimidation. Now they think that I will certainly return to China, so they are waiting for me to turn myself in.
What is your father's situation?
My father is a Communist Party member. He firmly supports Xi Jinping's rule. In addition, he is a scholar on communist theories. My father and I are two drastically different people, holding opposite viewpoints. That's why I know clearly that this time he is being hypocritical with me, not out of genuine fatherly affection.
What about your mother?
My mother is doing an ordinary job. She is just like any ordinary mother. She is very worried about my situation. She is not strongly against the CCP either. She is just very concerned about me.
When was your father summoned by the police?
End of April.
How many times?
My father did not tell me all the details. The police asked to have a video conference with me twice, which I recorded. Before that, my father was probably summoned 4 or 5 times. Recently, the police asked him to report on my situation every week. I don't know whether he is still going to the police station. I try to minimize the contacts with him, and I would not tell him much about myself, hoping that the police finds it useless to harass him.
I would like to know why you know so much about the Tiananmen Square massacre, and you have the courage to uphold justice. What experience did you have to help you forge your value system?
It's simply because I had access to the true information. Since childhood, I have learned the facts of the CCP's cruelty. People seem to ignore it and get accustomed to it, but I find it unacceptable. I feel that, be it the CCP's policies or its true history, the CCP lies to the Chinese people as if the regime is the big parent, and all the Chinese people are ignorant kids who can be tricked at will. Everyone feels that they live in an atmosphere of terror, and they are helpless. I have been familiar with hospitals since I was a child, because some family members are hospital workers. I know that indeed hospitals are using Falun Gong practitioners' organs for transplants. These hospital workers all know that these organs are obtained through immoral means, but the doctors are so used to it that they no longer look at it as an extremely evil crime. They even mention it to young children. I feel that it is totally unacceptable.
When did you first learn about this? While you were in China or after you came abroad?
In China, when I was 5 or 6 years old.
How are you able to comprehend these things when you were only 5 or 6?
If your question is mainly about organs, I will explain it in more detail. Someone in my family works in a hospital. The organs for transplants are not only from Falun Gong practitioners, but also death row prisoners and prisoners of conscience. The situation of organ transplants in China is very messy. This is indeed something many people are aware of. Some adults would talk about it when kids are around, as they think kids don't understand. My parents are both intellectuals. I learned of many things when I grew up, and I learned to break through the Great Firewall when I was in high school. I then proactively sought truth and facts on the internet. However, even if I don't know how to overcome the internet censorship, I am very unhappy with China's political system, as well as the education system. I was a defiant student.
In Australia, there are many students who are supporters of the CCP. Are you worried about your safety as you have participated in anti-CCP movements?
The number of CCP supporters is the highest in Australia, more than those in the United States. This is because many Chinese students are admitted to Australian schools because they pay higher tuition than other students. Among them are children or grandchildren of the CCP's top officials.
Many young people in their 20s don't know much about the Tiananmen massacre, nor do they care to know. When did you learn about the incident? What are your thoughts?
As a matter of fact, I believe most Chinese young people in their 20s know the basic facts about the massacre. Based on my observation, all my friends know about it. The key issue is, the most horrific thing is, our generation is very different from the young people in 1989. The generation of 1989 had a strong sense of responsibility for the country, for the future of our nation, as they felt they were the owners of the country. Our current generation feels powerless. Each of us is just a sheep that is bound to be sheared someday. As a result, some act as cowards. Some people think that if they turn a deaf ear to sensitive issues, they can still manage to enjoy a peaceful life in China. Some even choose to be onlookers in the face of social injustice.
Your viewpoint is very different from that of your parents. How do you handle this difference?
Honestly, I don't know how to handle these conflicts. We, my parents and I, certainly always have affection for one another, but this affection turns out to be a pain for me. Previously, I tried to change my parents as I thought there was still hope for them, but now my father turned against me. I feel very sad that he does not care about my safety at all. He asked me to turn myself in, simply because he wants to declare his political stance. Since childhood, he never took me to travel around. Now he needs to persuade me to go back to China in order to turn myself in. He told me how much he missed me, recounting the so-called happy moments we had together, and he promised that he would travel with me when I go home. It is so very disgusting.
Now the state security is targeting you. Is it mainly because of your comments on the Tiananmen massacre?
Not just Tiananmen massacre. My Twitter posts cover a variety of topics, including criticism of Xi Jinping. I don't know how they found out my identity. When they saw that I criticized Xi on Twitter, they said that my crime belongs to the very serious type.
The interview was conducted on June 4th by Gu Xiaohua of the Chinese language Epoch Times.
The Chinese Communist Party's cover-up led to a pandemic that now threatens the lives of people around the globe. With over 7 million people infected, China is still defensive about independent international inquiry into the origin and spread of the CCP virus. The Epoch Times has initiated a global Sign the Petition campaign calling for investigating, condemning, and rejecting the CCP. We believe that investigating and exposing the truth is the only way that we can remain safe. Let's take action. Sign the petition at rejectccp.com. That's all for today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this program with friends and family to keep them informed about the latest news and updates. Thank you for joining me. See you next time.